Okay, in this brief video, I'll talk a little bit about the integration aspect. So we talked, kind of introduced you to some of the key aspects of what makes a project successful, what's unique about a technology project. Then we talked about the strategy, a little bit of how do you come up with a project that's going to make sense, that's going to be value added. Now we're going to talk about a little bit about integration, and it's not that all these things are tightly woven, but it's just a general topic that we need to know as we start into this. What we're talking about with integration is coordinating all the activities of project management so that the project moves forward in a consistent and ordered approach. And what the book's going to talk about is basically a set of process groups. Process, when we talk about that, a series of actions directed toward a particular result. So there's a set of processes that will be executed throughout the course of the project. Initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and then closing out. Most of what we think in terms of project management, you're thinking in terms of executing. But what we want to make sure we're doing is thinking about all of these in terms of a sequenced set of processes that are being executed by you as project management. And then there are handoffs between those two. They don't all start and stop at exactly the same time. And that's what this sort of chart here shows. There's a lot of initiating process. So initiating process group, you're talking about setting up charters, getting people to buy in, doing business cases, all that kind of stuff. Investment in making the right decision as to what the project should be and how to go about it. Then you do a lot of planning, right? You're going to say, what suppliers we're going to use, what technologies, what people, all that kind of stuff. Laying out their coursework, getting them all squared away, and setting that up. And you see that kind of drifts down over time as the execution begins. Now you got people actually working this stuff. And then there's this closing process that says, all right, as we get ready, let's get the training. Once we get to the point where we're done here, we can get material together for training, we can get material together, close it out, all that kind of stuff. Throughout all of it, you've got this monitoring and controlling process, which is you as a project manager spending the time to make sure that as the project progresses, it's doing what it needs to do. Each of these processes are going to go throughout those phases of the project. And on the left there, the knowledge areas that we talk about: project integration management, project scope management, time management, cost management, and we'll see others on the other chart, communications and such. Those will have different sort of touch points within each of these process groups as we move forward. And that's really what these two charts sort of go through here. So quality management, in the planning stage, you're going to be doing quality planning. In the executing phase, you're going to be doing the quality assurance. In monitoring and controlling, you're going to be doing quality control. So quality management as a domain, as a knowledge area, has to be supported in all of these processes as well. So you got to make sure that you're taking care of each one of these knowledge areas as you move forward through the project. We'll talk a little bit about initiation in particular here and go into planning, because those two, from an integration standpoint, really set the stage for what you're going to be doing with the project on integration. Initiating a project includes recognizing and starting a project or a project phase if it's a very large project. What they're truly trying to accomplish here is get a project manager on board, identify your key stakeholders, get your business case defined and approved, and get your charter, right? So this is really everyone coming together to say, this is what we're going to go do, and this is the people that support it and why it's going to be backed, going forward. What the goals are, all that kind of stuff. Planning then is, once you've got that sort of initiation, then it's planning to say, all right, how are we going to actually execute this thing? So now we've got approved. Everyone thinks this is a good idea and we got goals. How are we going to actually build this thing and make sure it gets accomplished correctly? And so there's this big phase of project planning where you go through and identify all that. So a lot of what we're going to be doing this term is going to really sort of fall under that planning. The simulation will allow you to do some execution stuff like we're seeing here with project execution. But a lot of it's going to be based on whatever plans we come up with in the second and third week here. Executing typically takes the most time and resources, right? This is where you've got people doing development, you've got people doing testing, all that kind of stuff. Project managers have to use a lot of leadership skills in this particular area to make sure you're doing successful execution. Monitoring and controlling, again, happens throughout the entirety of the project, and it involves measuring your progress, identifying any deviations, those kinds of things, and taking corrective actions as you go. That's in motion, and you're the captain just trying to keep the boat from going, too far to the left or too far to the right. This will affect all the other process groups and occurs during all the life cycle, all the phases of the life cycle. It includes, the performance reports, requesting changes, those kinds of things. Closing is really about getting that stakeholder and customer acceptance of the final projects and services. So we say a project has a defined beginning and end, right? Well, this is the end. I mean, we should be able to wrap this up and be able to say we are successful or we're not successful, and basically close this thing out and move on to the next thing. Release all the resources that needs to be released. Take everything you've learned, put it in an archive, lessons learned, those kinds of things, so that you can actually get this thing done. This is the overview then. Your integration management. And then you've got the, basically your project development. You develop your project charter. You got preliminary scope statement. You got a project management plan. You got project execution you're going to do. You monitor and control that work. And there's all these little inputs into these processes and tools and techniques that you're going to be executing and using for those, and then outputs to each one of these projects. And then at the end there, you're closing it out. The startup documents that we're going to talk about really focus on these two. It's a project charter that formally recognizes the existence of the project, and the scope statement. And the scope statement is key because it develops a common understanding of what is going to be in the project and also what's not going to be in the project. So it's very important to understand and lock that down so you don't wind up with the scope creep issue where it's not defined well enough, so people kind of use the opportunity to slip in something they think would be cool here and there. All that adds to work. You want to keep it clear, you want to keep it concise, and you want to keep it as small as possible to ensure success of the project. The project management plan is separate. You have the charter, you have a scope document, and then you've got a project management plan. That's going to coordinate all the planning documents and help guide the overall project execution. The elements in this are going to usually be like an introduction, an overview of the project, description of how it's going to be organized, who's going to be in it, management and technical processes that you're going to use as you go forward, and then the work to be done, what's actually going to be executed and accomplished throughout this thing. We will be developing a project management plan as a part of our execution this term as well. Those three documents are key, and we'll be developing those. That's basically gets us started with integration. So that's what we need to know there.